Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second podcast of Observe Intelligence. I have a very special guest with us today, Dr. Tyagi, and I'd like to go over his bio. He's accomplished a lot of things. He teaches machine learning, and I thought it'd be really good to bring him on board and kind of ask him some questions to get his vision on the future of data science and automation in the energy sector. So before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and read the bio, and then we'll welcome Dr. Tyagi and go right into questions. So Professor Tyagi is Chevron 3 designated associate professor at the Kraft and Hocking Department of Petroleum Engineering, Louisiana State University. He also holds a joint faculty appointment at the Center for Computation and Technology, LSU, since 2007. He obtained his PhD in mechanical engineering from LSU, an undergraduate in mechanical engineering from Indian Institute of Technology. His current research interests span across physics-based simulation using high-performance computing and data analytics for interdisciplinary petroleum engineering applications, such as image-based pore-scale modeling using Landes-Bozeman method, multi-scale, multi-phase computational fluid dynamics, geothermal reservoir engineering, and unconventional reservoir simulations. He has also worked on the issues in the quantitative risk assessment of offshore petroleum engineering operations and their impact on regional economy. He has given numerous invited talks at India, China, and several US universities, and published over 50 peer-reviewed technical publications. It takes so much time to write one peer-reviewed publication, but he has 50 of them. So that's great accomplishment. Among many courses he has taught at LSU, data analytics and machine learning applications for petroleum engineering as a senior technical elective complement the data visualization and computational method courses. Since the beginning of 2020, he is serving as the Data Science and Petroleum Engineering Fellow at Innovate Upstream Inc. At Innovate, digitalization technologies combine big data components with advanced artificial intelligence to offer exploration production companies to improve operational efficiencies as well as reservoir productivity across the entire value chain of upstream operations. Well, with that being said, I'd like to welcome Dr. Tyagi to the show, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Dr. Tyagi, welcome on board.
Thank you, Dr. Tyagi. Thank you for the opportunity. Actually, this has been like a journey for me to learn, along with how this area is getting. Oil and gas industry is a kind of a late adopter to this particular technology. So we've been kind of watching about it, reading about it, but sort of, I'm glad that we started a little bit early than some of the other universities on adopting this. Yeah, I would sound like as a learner of this technology more than actually a professor on this particular thing. So, but nonetheless, thanks for your very generous introduction, and I'm looking forward for learning a lot from you. This has been my kind of like curiosity-driven thing, and kind of collaborating with professionals like you to kind of see how different perspectives on same technologies can shape up our future. So thank you for giving this opportunity. I'm looking forward to see how I can contribute to your mission of disseminating about machine learning and data sciences in our industry. Thanks, Dr. Tyagi.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today. So we're just going to go right into the questions. We have a lot of exciting questions, and we want the audience to kind of see your vision. You have a lot of experience in this field. We just want to see your vision in terms of those questions. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, what is your overall vision for data science and automation in the oil and gas industry?
Yeah, that's a excellent. Yeah, so in terms of vision, like all emerging technologies and all the interesting ideas that come out of various research groups, I would say it has to impact in terms of the value to the industries, and the value can be delivered in many aspects. One of the big things that we talk about the value of our technologies in the efficiency in decision making, or like how do you use the data. Let's say the machine learning can help you in making the business intelligence type of decision making. So that's like one of the first ones, in efficiency in using the data. and making better decisions, right? The second one, which is really, really close to my heart, is the safety.
Mhm.
Could machine learning and this data science and automation help make improvement in operational safety, human factor safety, and also even in terms of basically showing that we are actually being cognizant about environmental concerns also. So I think in that sense, I think safety related issues that can be addressed by data science and automation, I think would be fantastic. And then the third one that actually happens, which is what the mission of all these things is actually predictive analytics.
Mhm.
The purpose of almost all simulations, all decision making is basically you get the biggest bang for buck if your predictions are correct.
Mhm.
So we are in the sort of like a game where we take decisions, and the accuracy of making those decisions about what's going to happen in the future, which is prediction, how accurate they are, that's how the value comes to the companies. So I think predictive analytics, whether it is in the area of like anomaly detections or the area of predictive maintenance, or uh, we could talk about, when say specific like certain valve stability, if you could predict it ahead of time and then save on certain operational time, downtimes, these are certain like the big three things that I see that adds value to our industry in terms of using these data science and automation.
Yeah, yeah. That's very interesting because as somebody who has a reservoir engineering background, I always think about, geoscience and then, reservoir and completions and those aspects. I don't usually think about safety. And I think there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of safety, especially in the oil and gas industry. I haven't really seen a lot of machine learning projects that focuses on safety. So that's actually really good. I actually didn't think about it in the past. So thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting. So which areas in the oil and gas industry do you foresee the biggest advantage of using machine learning to solve complex problems? Do you think that in the future it's going to be primarily on drilling, completions, production, midstream, or do you see a combination of all of these aspects, that we're going to see a huge impact on?
Very nicely put. Very nicely put, Dr. Beliadi. I think it's going to be probably adopted across all once they become very clear how the advantages are. But let me start, kind of taking compliment from the first questions. I think the biggest impacts comes when you have largest amount of uncertainty in decision making.
Mhm.
So for us, that happens in the early phases of, exploration and drilling. And that's where we don't know much about the information. The data is scarce, and how do you do machine learning on the data sets that are really sort of like incomplete, or really coming in the real time? So the value of basically making decision is, right, really, this is the data I'm coming in, and how do I do it? So I think in terms of the biggest advantage of using machine learning definitely would come from drilling and completions, in terms of, again, safety, efficiencies, look ahead of the drill bit. How do you make assessment about some of these geology issues, wellbore stability issues? Definitely that, because once you do the completions, and then the rest of the productions and things are kind of determined by that decision that you actually made so early in the well construction stage. Definitely, the question that you actually put and then very nicely described about your reservoir part is definitely reservoir management, and then managing all these, long-term production predictions, and then trying to combine them with the let's say market or financial data. A lot of times people have been talking about, well, we are doing managing these things. These are getting more and more complex. So I think reservoir management and maintaining the production, and then of course using predictive analytics in as many aspects of it. So these are definitely some of the few big advantages. And another thing that we have not sort of dwelled in the first part of it is there's going to be a very pervasive use of sensors and IoT data sets that are coming through. So we will be knowing about our operations, or our fields and assets in a lot more details in the coming future. So this deluge of data is only useful if we use it.
Mhm.
So I think there is just so much data that's going to be coming in. If we are not going to be using this data, then it's useless. So something like, even in the case of safety, we used to talk about this near miss reporting, but I
Mhm.
don't remember like how many people have really analyzed the near misses to actually make improvement in safety standards.
Mhm.
So this is something that you could do with machine learning, and it's not been done yet. So I think this is like, I think some of the big advantage in machine learning that can help. solve some really, really complex problems, especially that affect our decisions in the very early phases of well constructions that can actually impact the long-term production. So you ought to be able to predict as early as possible at the time of completions and drilling how much you should be actually coming out of, what would be the ultimate recovery out of this well or so. Such questions, if you can answer, that will have big advantage.
Yeah, that's very interesting, especially on the near miss. I think we all track it like every day, but we haven't thought about, actually predicting that in advance, so we can really eliminate a lot of the safety issues we have, because a lot of these near misses could be catastrophic events, so if we can completely like predict those and really find the root cause of these near misses, it can really help the industry tremendously. That's a very good point. And I think you've touched on some of this. So my next question was, what are some of the examples that machine learning can actually solve? And if you can kind of elaborate a little bit more on, how it can add value to the industry, because a lot of times, I think we have a lot of different companies that have really good products, and they always talk about, hey, here's what we can do, here's what we can do. But usually, as somebody who works for an EMP company, we usually ask, what is the end value of this like analysis or of this machine learning project? How can it really truly add? What's the value proposition? What is the value proposition? I think that's a question that a lot of people actually kind of miss to focus on. A lot of the projects in terms of machine learning and AI, I think could be really valuable and could be like really cool. But until we define the value proposition, is really hard to convince the upper management. Hey, let's take on this new project that could automate the task, or could do something that could improve the production, or that could really change the like the way the field is set up, and so on and so forth. So can you give us like a few examples that you've worked on in the past, and kind of talk about some of the value proposition of those examples within the oil and gas industry?
Absolutely. I think I think this is how we learn, or this is how we actually going to have an adoption of technology by demonstration. So this is a very, very well put question, and I'll go with the approach of simpler solutions that are kind of sort of ready, and we can demonstrate to something which is slightly more complex and a little bit in the future, but it's coming. No matter what, like how we think about it, it's going to be coming. So one of the first examples I would say is looking into predictive maintenance or something like that. When you actually have like a productive field, you have wells running on ESPs. If you can actually predict the failure rates of ESPs as close to their failure point, but well ahead of time, so that you do not actually have to have a catastrophic shutdown, that would have a big value addition, because people have shown, when you try to fix things after they have broken, they usually take longer time, more cost, and they are slightly more riskier. So if you could do that, I think this has been shown in other industries, especially in aerospace and automotive, where they were early adopters of these kinds of technologies. I think they're doing that. They're able to predict the failure rates of their components and parts, right? So that's one thing that all oil and gas industries can easily adapt to. The second one that again comes back to the topic that we are kind of mentioning, that it is useful, is detecting anomalies, something like during drilling stage, like cake detections, any of these events that can surprisingly turn into like a well control incident. If you could do that with given early enough, which allows the operators and the folks, the drillers, to actually come up with the sort of recommendations, or they use their experience to actually address these kinds of well-controlled incidents. I think that would be another big bang for the buck for such a technology, because nowadays we keep talking about it. The systems are getting more and more complex, and the failure of very complex systems happens in a very complex way also. So I think it is important that we try to use our computational powers and this data science to the fullest advantage. And then of course there is a lot of sensors, and everything's going to get distributed into the field. A lot of data is getting generated. Should it be hosted locally? Should it be going to the central locations? Is there going to be a lot of data generated? Will it be using edge computing versus cloud computing? You can have all of these use cases where edge computing really helps you take a better decision than versus the cloud computing of the complete asset in terms of, so all actually this combines into is how do we actually use all this data and computing resources for better and faster decisions that truly turns into business intelligence. So I think these are the progression of more complicated asset-based decisions to something which is very simple is like, okay, a component in my system is about to fail, but all of these things need to benefit out of this technology. So this is where my standpoint of it is take simple decisions to convince yourself that this thing works,
Mhm.
and then be a doctor and then be bullish about it and then spread it across your organization, and then you can actually use this technology. Everybody would be more comfortable accepting what is recommending. Otherwise, nobody wants to trust a black box, especially when they have not seen it work and save them money, right? Yeah.
No, really, really good application, especially the predictive maintenance. I think you hit the nail on on the head here, because a lot of there are a lot of different like companies actually emerging from predictive maintenance technology on the drilling side, as you mentioned. Sorry, on the production side, like ESP, as you mentioned, on the drilling side, or even like on the completion side. On predictive like maintenance on frac pumps. Or predictive like maintenance on, let's just say, compressor station or compressors like on the production side. So I think this is a very important like area that I think a lot of like companies are actually realizing the potential of it. So really good examples. And then actually we're going to get into the cloud versus edge computing in a minute, and kind of pick your brain on that a little bit too. So with these applications, I guess, which areas within the data science field are you most like bullish about? Like you're mostly like, oh my God, I'm really excited. I'm really excited about this area more than like anything else.
Yeah, no, this is an exciting one because as mentioned to you, I'm sort of like getting into this area slightly late than a lot of our experts. So my interest, as you would talk about, is what I've been reading a lot lately. So I'm most bullish about like actually the more I'm learning about this machine learning, and I'm finding it's very impressive cases in the area of, let's say, healthcare, or in the area of how they've done it in retail. So machine learning is probably going to be one of those areas where you're going to find how it helps complicated decisions, and it actually finds those kinds of you know uh, examples where you would say, oh, how the hell this thing came up with that kind of an answer. So I think we are just waiting for those kinds of a whoa moment, eureka moment from these kinds of things from machine learning. Definitely business intelligence. I think at the end of the day, the company has to make economic sense. So they have to come up with profits. They have to come up in a very, very competitive and this kind of volatile market. How do they basically survive these tough times? I think that these tough decisions, you have to have some sort of help. In this particular case, is using wide variety of data sets and not just make like same repeated mistakes. We are in a cyclic market. A lot of time people simply say, well, company went into these kinds of situations, but you can't be making same bad decisions over and over again, right? Especially when we look at it, can these kinds of, that large amount of data, you're looking at where the human resources are, where the assets are, could we make better decisions, especially for business? I think business intelligence through data analytics is another area that I'm really, really bullish about.
Yeah. It's actually really interesting. You talk about business intelligence, like it's even like HR. You talk about, we can predict, like if you can predict, like just one simple example, if an employee is going to quit or not in advance, you can probably do something about it, right? Especially if that employee is a high value employee, you can do something about it to retain that employee. So I think this is an area that I see a lot of potential, and I think, to be honest with you, we haven't even tapped into those areas yet. I think, especially within the energy sector, I'm sure like other industries have kind of looked into it a little more in detail, but in the energy sector, we've been focusing on mostly like, reservoir production and drilling and that kind of stuff, that I think people kind of miss that, oh, you can actually apply this to predict so many different things, and there are different applications for it. So the business intelligence is actually a very good one. Yeah. And I'm actually glad you mentioned that. So if you had to, predict in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years, what are your top three predictions, like over the next 5 to 10 years in the field of data science? If you had to predict today.
Okay, no, this is good. I'm not I'm not much of a predictor, right? I can tell you, I can run simulations, but this is tough. Like, let me give it a thought to it.
Yeah.
So definitely, as we are building these use cases, I'd really see predictive analytics. If you want to do predictions, you better use predictive analytics well to make your case. So like machine learning for processes that have very large uncertainties, or at least the biggest use case you can make is kind of like safety risks. So if there is anything that you can do in terms of addressing, making decisions with uncertainties and high risks, definitely, if you can make success stories about how to do predictive analytics using machine learning, that should have a huge impact. So that's one, like early kick detection being one of them, diagnosing any wellbore stability issues, or talking about, production performance at the time of completion itself. That would be very useful. These are some examples. Or predictive maintenance, another one. So that's one. Second one would be this pervasive use of sensors through the automation and edge computing. I think this is coming, whether we like it or not. I think for folks may keep talking about it. Well, there's a security concerns, there's other concerns. I think those things will get addressed over a period of time. But once you start having sensors all over, and then there's a very strong technologies of communication and storage and connecting it to a central, like cloud resources or edge resources. If you don't use that data and then find the best use of data with its arrival time, we are losing the value of the data. So I think the better decision making, timely decision making, using this pervasive use of IoT sensors, through the use of edge computing and all. This is another one that I see coming, and we will need help. This is not an area where oil and gas folks are typically an expert on, but there are others that can help. So we should use that. And then, of course, the third one that I kept repeating in the other ones is, again, coming back to the business intelligence, is we have seen in the last, I think, our careers is a fraction of compared to a lot of people that have seen much more up and down cycles. But we have seen more volatility in the last few decades, like 15 years or so, how the oil and gas industries have been fluctuating, and the prices of oil can go from, really less than $30 to almost $120. I've seen all kinds of stuff, so, and my career is actually not even comparable to some of my other colleagues, esteemed colleagues, but that seeing so many ups and downs, I think you definitely need some sort of better business intelligence that just does not keep repeating same mistakes over and over again. So I think sooner we learn, better we understand this market volatility, scenario planning for extreme events, be more responsible towards everything that we are doing in terms of society and environment. I think these are things that can help our industry. This is where kind of coming from. Otherwise, we are always reacting. We are not proactive. That's the thing. I want this data science to help our industry be proactive and to plan for all these things, rather than just be like, oh well, this happened and the oil prices are down, and what do we do? No, yeah. I think you would have a better idea what to do even before the prices are that low. Yeah.
Sure. Since you touched on the cloud versus edge computing, can you kind of define the differences between cloud and the edge computing for the average listener? I think a lot of people have not heard of edge computing before. So can you kind of define the differences, the primary differences between cloud and edge computing for the average listener?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is good. Yeah, there are very simple articles. Actually, I learned about these when these terms were coming up through list. Don't start with the technical ones. I start with some articles like on Forbes. This is easy to understand when you read these articles about what's the difference between cloud and edge, and that's article coming on Forbes. So that's pretty interesting. And these things have been around for a while. This is not like this thing just came out. Basically, if you were to think of cloud computing as a remote data center that's full of computers that are connected via internet. Okay. Not only they provide a lot of compute power, but they are available for, like, let's say, cost per unit that is available to your customers with some sort of pricing plans. This is how they have been doing. And then there are, like, folks talk about majority of these three main ones are Azure from Microsoft, of course, you have AWS, Amazon clouds, and then of course Google. These are the three big players in these things. There are other players that are trying to come, but they don't have this big market sector. So that's really cloud in the simplest form. On If I were to try to attempt to define edge in a simpler terms, so this is basically sort of like, you can say, an opposite approach to cloud, but think of it in terms of Internet of Things. Basically, you have sensors and all this data coming through. This is basically, the idea would be to run all your applications, data analysis as close to the physical location of where the data is getting generated. Okay.
Yeah.
So like this one actually helps when you do not have, like I talked about, for the cloud, you need like the internet or wireless communications to the central resources. In the absence of a reliable internet connections and communication, you could definitely do edge computing right over at the physical location of where the data was generated. And then again, scenarios, if I like the idea that when somebody says, when you are in a vehicle and you are trying to calculate the fuel economy based upon the speed and consumptions, so you have sensors in your car, they're telling you right there. And when the computer in the car is telling you that, that's your basically edge computing. But if you have the whole traffic situations and everything else, all the information going from all the computers to talk about, what's the optimal path to, let's say, save on your fuel, that would be the cloud. Because you could not have done all the information about everybody else where the traffic is. So yeah, these are examples that have been discussed in the easy to read magazines like Forbes. So I definitely recommend the listeners and the the novices that are trying to learn about these things, definitely start from something non-technical, and then look at it in your day-to-day life, and analyze what's edge computing and what's cloud computing there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very good. Very good explanation, especially the edge. I'm very excited by the edge computing myself, especially when you can apply these models that you generate, these machine learning models, right on the edge device at the well site. I think that creates a lot of real time optimization, opportunities for the oil and gas industry. So thanks a lot for really breaking it down in a manner that an average listener can understand. So my next question is, I'm sure you guys are always thinking in school and have a lot of good ideas. So what are some of the current projects that you guys are working on in school that could potentially have a positive impact on the industry? Because I know, like a lot of times, a lot of these ideas, get started from school, and actually they slowly transition to the industry. What are some of the projects that you guys are currently working on that you can share, of course, non-confidential, have a positive impact on the industry?
I think this is really really as being an academic, this is probably one of the closest to the heart question that you asked. How do I basically break it down to the interesting things for the next generation workforce training? Because if you're talking about all these technology, we talk about how to do this thing in industry, the first onus as an academic constituent is I have to teach and train and then demonstrate it with my students, the how do we do it. So the couple of things that are coming within my group that we have done is definitely a demo project on these IoT edge analytics using like a remote. You create like a demo for a monitoring of a remote well using simple IoT devices on like a simple system. But one of the things that is unique at LSU is we actually have a well facility. We can actually ask industries to come and then test their such devices, collect that data, and then do the analysis on that. So this is something that will be coming. I'm not going to give more details about that, but nonetheless, this IoT edge analytics, possibly including the cybersecurity concerns, because we have not done that yet. But these are the thing issues that will be addressed in some of the projects that are coming from the group. The things that we have demonstrated and published is time series data analytics, especially when you are doing for early detections, classification of the gas kick risks. And these things have implications for real-time monitoring, just like you were talking about. If you have all this sensor data coming from your, mud gains, you have sensors, the downhole gauges, flow in, flow out. If based upon all this information, you could at least gain a little bit in terms of, especially in HPH2 drilling, where the conditions change so much that detection of a gasket would become very difficult. So I think time series data analytics is going to be a very useful use case, and we have done some work in that particular area. The another one area there where I'm really really excited about is I think we talk about machine learning, neural nets, and all these things, but I think the idea is being, are they physics informed? How do we actually come up with some sort of reduced order model that conform to the physics that we have learned for, let's say, many decades before that, or something that we trust and is not just truly a blue black box? So I think we are trying to work on some of these ML use cases for like water flooding, and that's again, both of us teach reservoir simulations and all. So this is something as an asset management, as a reservoir management, if you're trying to do something like machine learning for that, but not only can you actually just do the final, this is the prediction and this is the regression that is coming out of it, but you actually build a physics informed model out of this that has some interpretability. I think these are certain projects that are going on within my research group, and I'm really really excited. And tell you the truth, all credit to these students. I think I learned from them. So we can go on into these things as you're working on all these areas. No, I think students are working on each of these areas, and then just like through this discussion, we are having this over here. I've been very grateful to work with some really, really excellent students and learn a lot along with them. So this is a small snapshot of kind of projects that are going within my group.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing those projects with us. And so, if you have encountered this before, how do you guys recommend processing big data? I'm talking about maybe millions of rows or tens of millions or billions of rows, because as you know, like this the CPU capabilities, like after you get to millions of rows, get really limited. So do you recommend using like AWS from Amazon, Azure from Microsoft, or simply Google? And can you kind of explain a little bit to the average audience, the differences between these three type of main cloud computing?
Wow, yeah, this is so I would admit that I'm not in depth with all of them, but one or two of them. So let me take a shot at it, and I'll try to answer this because I sort of evaded to it in the earlier part, that how the market share is.
Sure.
There is a reason why the market shares are. It's very difficult to change those market shares unless and until you have very disruptive technologies. So currently, the largest market share for cloud is AWS,
Yep.
and then look at the partnerships that they have. So keep that in mind.
Mhm.
Second largest is definitely Azure,
Sure.
and in that sense, you would see, the comparison basically. How what is going with another one. In
Mhm.
terms of Google, I think it is the third largest market share. One thing that bothered me a little bit in the early part of this year is um, there was a Greenpeace article or something for oil and gas, and Google said that they're not going to do any AI work for oil and gas companies and all. While I'm appreciative of all these data centers and these kinds of companies, I think we don't discriminate between who's hurting environment and all, because all these data centers that are eating up all these energies, they're also needing energies. Not everything that has been done is not carbon neutral, whichever way you want to kind of account for it. It's so I think between the Azure and AWS, I think oil and gas industries will find majority of their cloud needs addressed. This is how I feel. I think we do not have any complicated needs compared to, let's say, healthcare industries or so, that are already being addressed by AWS and Azure that we could not help. I think these two companies will step up and will figure it out one way or another how to do it. So I'm going to give you like my view for like comparing these two what I've looked at. In my group, we've used Azure partly because academics, and then we had a easy setup for them. So it's uh, like a disclaimer, I'm agnostic to this. I don't recommend one product over another, but in my opinion, I think they both are launching new products. There will be new pricing structures, new integrations, and you will make a selection based upon what's the need for the organization. I think in terms of use, in terms of trying to take your large data sets, I think both of them are equally capable. So I don't, I'm agnostic, let's say, in terms of, if you were to kind of put a label on me, I'm an exploitative user of technology. If somebody comes up with a solution, I want to try to push the limit of the technology and see how it helps my use case to get the best result out of it. But it's not the area where we are doing the development. We are not building clouds. We're not in that business of it. So I would leave it to the experts to build that. But I think what we have to demonstrate it within the oil and gas industry is how to make the best use of it. And I think from what I have read about Azure and AWS, I think both of them are equally capable. I'll leave it at that.
Got it. Got it. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Tyagi. So the next question that I have is, everybody loves an underdog story, like when you talk about disruptions, and we know that like AWS and those guys have spent billions of dollars on their, data centers and on the cloud computing and kind of really have done a great job, I think, but I always like think about who's next, what are the next, like few moves in terms of who's going to come out and really disrupt those technologies, So do you think some disruptors would disrupt the business model of AWS or Azure, in the near future? I know it's a very tough question, and I'm sure
Yeah.
these big companies have thought about all kinds of ways to make sure they don't get disrupted, but there's always somebody who is much smarter than the average person, or much smarter than even these major corporations. They can really think really outside the box and disrupt some of these technologies, So do you think, in your mind, do you think that we're going to see some disruptors, even challenging those major cloud computing, companies that are out there?
Yeah. So one thing that I've learned on these things is I've kind of had these bets during the grad school days of, well, this is not going to work, that's not going to work, and then I've lost a couple of those bets to some really smart guys. So that one thing you learn is never say never again. It's very difficult to kind of rule out a possibility. So I think it's very much plausible that there is going to be something like that. But let me give you a reality check. It's very, very difficult to beat when you have such a large market share owned by these three big companies. So anytime when you see such a disruptive technology, unless and until it's sort of not on the radar of these three companies, you would rather see a merger and acquisition by one of these three guys.
I see.
So like, if somebody comes up with, Databricks or something like that, okay, somebody will buy that, it became part of Azure. So it's not that difficult for these big three with the kind of their financial footprint that they have and the sort of market they have, that they will be able to acquire any of the companies, unless and until it's like backed by investors, or the technology is so different, radically different, that it was not even on their radar. So in that particular sense, I do see that there is a possibility, but I'm not an expert in this particular area. So I think I would take my word with a pinch of salt that as a user, I see that this can happen. But from a practical, being pragmatic about it, how do you actually enter a market which has been, think about it, I have to come up and then there's a new chip manufacturer, and then the chip manufacturer wants to go against AMD versus Intel. Okay, of course there could be a new chip manufacturer. How do you enter there? But no, lo and behold, Nvidia came there. Nvidia came up with their graphics processors units, and then now they're purchased for the ARM going on over there. These are certain things that we did not anticipate.
Yeah.
So how these things happen is when it is not on their radar, everybody was thinking about, well, it's just a graphics card, it's a graphics processors unit, and then Intel is ahead, and AMD is ahead, and there you go. Here is a company that is actually giving the run for the money to all of these big chip manufacturers for some special cases. So I do see, such things can come up. This is the technology-driven world and the century that we are talking about. So I have learned my lesson hard way by losing bets to my very smart friends that never say never again. But as I said, I'm being pragmatic. For most folks, when they see something coming through, there will be a merger and acquisition happening first. And if they're missing it, it's just because they didn't see that particular technology competing against them until it started doing that. So I think that's the way I would answer this particular question. Underdog has a long road to go in this case. It's not an easy road.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. So if you're a small company today, what would you first like focus on this crowded field of data science? And if yes, what would you focus on, as
Wow. Okay. When we are a small company, small companies should focus on people.
Mhm.
So I think the main idea is how do you really help people? How do you make organizations better? So the really, again, I consider all of these things as means to an end, not really the goal. My goal is not to start using technology. This is why am I using this technology and how does it help? So that really boils down to its value. Anytime you show as a small company how does using this technology adds value in terms of the clients that you're supporting or the efficiency of your organization in saving the cost or increasing the profits, then I think I see folks will invest their time, energy, hire people in this particular area. But if they're not seeing value, if you do all this complicated data science and you give them a very obvious answer out of it, I think folks are not going to get impressed. So and which is happening quite a lot. I've seen some of these well, in a way we are learning, right? We think that this is going to give me some very complicated answer out of it, and then something comes out of it and you just look at it, I could have actually seen this thing coming if I would have given a little bit more thought. But I think small companies definitely should take care of how it helps take care of their people better. How do they make the decision making for the company in terms of their profits, in terms of their social responsibilities, everything uh, better. So value, that's what I would say. How data science adds value to your company, evaluate that, and then adopt it.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's very, very valid point. Very valid. As long as you can show any company that here's the value of what I'm going to do, then nobody can argue, right? You can
Right. Yes.
number one value proposition. Yeah, very, very good answer. So the next, I guess I'm going to take a little pivot here and kind of go to a little bit different side of AI. So I guess a common question a lot of people have is, will AI create more jobs than it eliminates, or no?
Ah, yeah.
It's
Oh
another
boy.
tough question.
This is tough. This is tough. Oh no, this is more than technical. I consider this as more of like a philosophical question, almost like an ethical question. I tell you. Okay, so the reason because and again I tell you as an academic that is trying to teach these courses, thinking that I am trying to train next generation workforce that will find such jobs in industry. So the pragmatic answer for me, it should create more jobs, right? Why am I teaching? Why am I asking students to come and take my course when they cannot find jobs in industry by learning all these courses? So definitely I find my inclination is towards, that it will create more jobs. However, there is a caveat to that particular comment. It has to take a swift reaction time to automation and AI adoption.
Mhm.
If we do it too late, somebody else does it for us. We just come back and look at that all the things been done by machines. We don't need it. um, I find that fear may come true. You may lose jobs in the short term,
Mhm.
and you may not have as many jobs in the long term. However, if the industries were taking more ethical and social responsibility role on it, and not just talk about this is my profits, the end goal is profit. No, I think you got to think it in terms of how many cycle things you have done, and how it actually shapes up the workforce careers, right? So if you take it as an organization, not just a decision for an immediate future, but for yourself, where my organization should be in 5, 10 years after adopting automation and machine learning, I think better decisions will come up. But I'll also say that this is just like my point of view, but there are a lot of other professors. One exciting point of view I learned was from Professor Moshe Verdi from Rice University. He was giving like a seminar at LSU. And of course, he does a very nice job about analyzing the artificial intelligence and future of work.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I would recommend our listeners and audience to actually also look at the point of view of Professor Moshe Verdi, and it's very well analyzed. And I think his is kind of like a bleak view of and he has data to support it. That's the good part. So it's not like silly optimism that from Professor Tyagi coming and saying, "Oh yeah, because I'm teaching and this is what's going to happen." He backs it up very well that at the pace at which the automation is happening, at the pace the AI is replacing humans. Are we even ready? Are we taking care of the people that are getting replaced with these jobs? What jobs can we train them for?
Mhm.
So the future of work, what he's showing it is getting separated out, that either you are going to have a huge peak in the low end jobs, like, janitorial work, or, the hourly wages type of, caring for older, we have the service industries, food delivery and things like that. Or the other end, which is where folks, professors or scientists like you that are really trying to develop the algorithm. So you're going to, so this bimodal distribution of the work and the jobs and salaries is going to be very unsustainable. He understands that, and it's actually happening is just because the speed at which all these things is happening, and we are not able to impart skills. And that's why I kind of put that caveat in my thing is give the responsibilities to the industries, give the responsibilities to the academy and everybody else that are training people on that, impart these skills to the next generation workforce, so they actually have jobs, they have work for them. Otherwise, I think just like for climate change, right? It was a responsibility for our generations and everybody to do it. If we miss it, then of course you are coming after the point of no return, right? There is always a point of no return. Same things will happen in the automation and AI. If we do not address in the targeted area what we want our next generation workforce to learn, we will be beyond the point of no return where these jobs will be eliminated.
I
But
see.
if we are taking it in a socially responsible manner, and we are doing it, this is how the organization wants to grow, take care of human capital also, not just talking about the capital as being my dollar value or whichever currency is going to be the strongest at that point, if it's bitcoin, right? But I think this is something that I wanted to kind of make almost like a plea to all our industries, is that I think don't fear it,
Mhm.
but when you adopt it, do it responsibly. I think whenever you take a technology, you got to take it with a lot of responsibility. It's same thing with nuclear. Nuclear was coming, it would have been a clean energy. You could have made, you know, terrible mistakes with the same technology. It's the same idea. When AI and automation is coming up, how can it help? When it helps, it should not be done in a fashion that it actually hurts the organization and the society in a long term. So long as we make those decisions, I am convinced. I think we can make those kinds of decisions. Therefore, there will be more jobs. But as I said, there are far learned experts and folks that have actually exactly the opposite viewpoint, and therefore I cited in my response to you. And thank you for giving it a philosophical turn and not just all technical. So I'm
No,
thankful
that's
that.
very good. So yeah, we'll put the I'll get the like information from Professor, you said Mushaviri, right? And then we
Moshe Vardi, Professor Vardi. Yeah, he's at Rice University. He's a computer science professor. Excellent analysis. This is for the users. I can send you those links in my email to you. I think that's something that you can look at it. I think it's futureoflife.org. If you go on to futureoflife.org, he's not only an excellent computer science, he's also like a bit on the philosopher side. So yeah, I sat through his seminar, listened to him, and he has quite a lot of data to back it up. And I see that as a cautionary sign. He's not trying to just put this, cry wolf kind of a situation, but he's sort of telling us, if we are socially responsible, ethically responsible, I think we might actually change. We may actually create more jobs than we actually are hurting people. But if we don't, well,
could be a
this is
problem,
going to happen. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Could be a problem.
Very
Yeah,
good.
that's very good. Very very good point. Yeah, we'll put the link for people for the audience to click on too.
Absolutely,
So
yes.
I guess for people that I got kind of fear AI in general, what's your advice to them? What do you recommend to them?
Okay, so this sort of dovetails with what we were talking about. I think the fear comes from a lot of not knowing it. Yeah.
Right.
So whatever is unknown, we fear. Um, but if we are, as I said, ethically and societally responsibly, we are trying to adopt this technology. I think the technology development and all, how it actually benefited, let's say, healthcare, how it benefited retail. There are definitely very powerful use cases to actually make a case why we should use it.
Yeah.
And this one, so this is sort of the question that you're asking that I do read on my free time. And one of the things that I read from the technology review from MIT, which is a very nice balanced view on, our fear of artificial intelligence, right? We fear artificial intelligence. So they gave a kind of like a two contrary view on it. And of course, the contrary view, one of them would be basically saying that, we'll definitely have uh, outstanding problems that will be solved by these super intelligent machines and things like that. So they consider this will be a very beautiful era, right?
Yeah.
And but you may actually find a lot of experts that are really warning, and these are like no small names. These are names like Stephen Hawking, or they're talking about you will not be able to compete against the advanced AI.
Yeah.
And of course, one of the very smart inventor from our times is Elon Musk. He's actually made a tweet saying, "Hope we are not just the biological bootloaders for digital super intelligence." Right? He has a concern. He's really looking at it from the perspective, and then he actually believes that. So he says, unfortunately, that's increasingly probable because he believes that we are not going to be able to catch up with it. So I think that's where the responsible part out of it.
Yeah.
We cannot just leave people behind saying, well, there cannot be done. So, okay, the person, cannot catch up with the AI, so just let them be. I think that's where the societal responsibility and ethical use of AI comes in. And they're investing. These guys have invested a lot in what we call Future of Life Institute and all that stuff. So the fear, whether they are existential risks for humanity because of AI, where do I stand on this? I say unknown should be an inspiration. Like this is something that I take a really I'll probably end with that rather than give you away right what I'm talking about. I think the unknown is for exploration. We shouldn't be fearful of unknown. I
Sure.
think we should have the courage to go into the unknown.
Yeah.
So I think in that particular sense, I'm not fearful of AI at all.
Mhm.
But then, as Professor Verdi and a lot of people would say, this is I think between you, me, and scientists that are putting a lot of our time over there, we don't fall on that part of the society that is. So I think that's where the responsibility comes on me to invest a lot in our next generation workforce, so that I have done my due diligence, right? That my students coming out of my group actually are, and which is why I feel very proud. They are getting jobs, even in this toughest time when the industry is actually facing it. All of them are finding jobs with, major oil companies that are trying to adopt this technology. So this is a good thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's just the nature. I think what we have dwelled upon it. It is a very subtle point in the human nature. Do you have a fear of unknown, or do you take it as a courage? That okay, I can jump onto it and then help a lot of people using this thing. Yeah.
That's very good. Yeah, yeah. I think once we become fearless, life becomes limitless. So
Yes. There you go. What's the worst can happen, right?
we shouldn't fear it. We should just go for it and learn it and try to adapt it. Right? Okay, that's good. That's good. And
With all the responsibility and ethics. Yeah, a lot of time when you do it, when you do it in a very irresponsible fashion, yes, it can have every technology can be. We have you looked at this documentary called Social Dilemma?
Yeah, actually, it's funny you mentioned this. I actually watched a documentary a couple of days ago. Very fascinating, and for the audience that haven't,
Right.
yeah, it's called Social like Dilemma. It is on Netflix, and it
Yes.
really talks about. It actually really talks about some of the problems that it has caused. In the
Yeah.
past, like few years, like especially like how divisive we are, and how actually the AI, using the AI that shows you the contents that you want to see, has caused like a lot of like polarization within the society. A very fascinating documentary for the audience that haven't watched it. But yeah,
If you let it unregulated, you do not put any responsibilities, it can be misused. They have shown that, how it creates polarizations, how it can affect election results and things like that. So this is something that, again, you got to take with, if I'm going to use this technology to do these kinds of decision making and all, what am I going to do with the people that were supposed to be helping me with this? Right? So I think there is a lot of onus on the organizations and everybody else, rather than just, oh, well, what I'm going to do next is do the cost cutting. These are the folks that will go away because I can take their decisions through an automated system. I think that's not how you address these things. So good. I'm glad that you had already seen that. But that was sort of like in the back of my mind is like sort of what we call is we validate ourselves when you look at another technology getting misused. Is we don't want to do that in our industry, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to take another little like pivot here to kind of wrap up the like our discussion on like I'm sure you've used different programming languages, like in school and for different projects. What programming language do you recommend using? I know it's just very subjective. I'm talking about we have Python, we have R, we have Julia nowadays. So for somebody kind of starting out, do you have any recommendations, or what would you recommend in general?
Excellent question for students, actually, if I tell you. Um, Let me give you my brief background. I've been programming since high school, right? So we learned BASIC, we learned Pascal. We came to grad school, we had to learn Fortran, all versions of it, parallelization through MPI. So I've been programming, throughout. During the my teaching, when I'm teaching sophomore level programming, we have gone through, MATLAB to, coding VBA macros and Excel for the students, dependent upon because how familiar they are with the programming concepts. And now back to Python. So within our university, in the courses that we're teaching to our sophomore and then go through the junior to the senior elective that I was mentioning to, we rely quite a bit on knowledge of Python.
Python, okay.
So that's what we're using in our group. But that said, I'm not a salesperson for any programming language because I had to learn so many through my things. I'm agnostic. I think whatever is most useful for your productivity of your organization, for your group, and for yourself, that's the one you should. Again, these are the means to an end, not the end itself. So programming language, I see it the same way. Exploitative in terms of usage. Right now, in terms of the amount of open source libraries and repositories that are available in Python in the area of machine learning and data science, I think Python's really, really rich. R is really rich for the statisticians and statistical learnings. And of course, Julia that you mentioned has a very nice programming paradigm to adopt and make it even in the high performance platform, how to use these things even better. So because I read about these kinds of programming language, I know what the advantages versus disadvantages are, but I find them, again, they're the means to the end. Look at it from the perspective of how you're reading. You can actually see a comparison on these blogs like towardsdatascience.com. So they have written a very nice comparison for top programming languages for AI engineers. And these are very recent viewpoints also. They do this comparison, but then at the end of the day, everybody comes back to it is whatever is most useful for you, what you think is getting the answer. In our group, in our university, how we designed it, we're focusing on Python.
Got it. Nice. Very good. Very good. And then one last question to wrap up the podcast, I guess, as the final thoughts, what are your general recommendations for someone starting out? I know you have a lot of students, you teach these courses, and what are, if somebody came to you today and asked you, hey, I'm trying to start out in this field, it really excites me, I have a lot of passion for it. What are some of the recommendations for somebody starting out, in this field?
Oh, yeah. So this is where I can go philosophy. Now, the recommendation to that what this is sort of like I have used this inspiration is from I know if you read comic strips by Will Watterson. There's a very nice character, Calvin and Hobbes, and there's a small it's like I just adore the genius of Bill Watterson in creating that. The last one says, "It's a wonderful world. Let's go exploring." So my same thing is I think it's journey. Anybody who wants to talk about it is like, what part of learning you enjoy the most?
Mhm.
If you are enjoying the learning, you will be exploring a lot. So the idea remains for everybody is don't just jump on the bandwagon.
Mhm.
You should have to do some sort of learning. You should find yourself. What is it that excites you the most? Jobs and everything will come according to your skills. The amount of time you invest in actually improving your skills definitely will come through. So it's not like, okay, I need to learn this thing for the job. If I do this kind of certification, I can get a job. That is happening, but that's not what you like as a mentor or as a professor. I would like to give that kind of an advice. I give it for the purpose of, what is the long-term vision. If you are truly enjoying learning the technology, you stay with the curve of how these newer technologies are influencing different sectors, like in this particular case, oil and gas or energy sector.
Mhm.
I think enjoy the parts that you really learn about these technologies, and then explore, be fearless. I think that's the message that I keep telling all my students when they're taking their final exam. That's the cartoon that goes on their exam paper. Let's go exploring. So I would give the same recommendation to our audience, to your friends, my friends, is that let's go exploring. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the
no, very
recommendation.
good. Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Tyagi. I personally learned a lot from this podcast. I would really appreciate you coming on and really providing your vision and like answering a lot of tough questions, actually, that are not easy to answer. So we really appreciate you taking the time to show up on the podcast. Like I'll make sure I put Dr. Tyagi's contact and like and information at the bottom of the YouTube like video so people can actually contact you if they have any more questions, but I'd like to say thank you so much for joining us today. And if you have any like final thoughts, please go ahead and.
Dr. Baliadi, this has been like a very nice opportunity. And when I was kind of trying to find out what you are doing over here, is I think in this particular time, especially when we are hurt through pandemic and how we are doing it, is I think this is a phenomenal initiative what you have started. I think having a conversation with you itself is almost like I used to have with my colleagues over a cup of coffee and how we used to work around. So this has been like a refresh. Let me put it that way. So I would personally like to express my gratitude and thank you for actually having spent a time, having this kind of conversation. I had my coffee. I saw that you were just drinking water. That's fine. That's fine.
That's
Then
great.
everybody
That's
has their own.
great.
Oh, I see. But this has been, that kind of intellectual stimulus that we crave for when we are in the academic setting. Go talk to my colleagues over a cup of coffee, sitting in a conference room over there. So thank you for providing that in a time when everybody is socially distant, and then you are not only trying to do it just for like one-on-one for yourself, but you're trying to put it out for an audience. That's a really, really commendable thing. So for that, I'll
Thank you
do
so
it.
much. Thank you so much. Thank you
uh,
so much. Thank you. Appreciate you. All
Take
right.
care.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.